Hey everybody, what's going on? It's James here with Crypto Common Sense, and I have a Bitcoin / cryptocurrency market update video for you for January the 11th. Before I jump into the content for this video, please do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and of course don't forget to check the description for links where you can join the Patreon to get much more frequent updates and access to the Patreon only Discord. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about the market, and I'm really kicking myself because I did shoot a video on Saturday, and about 15-20 minutes into it I just deleted it. I didn't even start to edit it. I was just like, I'm not doing this. I'm done making predictions. The market is just too parabolic to try to call right now, and unfortunately the prediction I made is exactly what happened. So what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about what I was going to say, and it's not about patting myself in the back, I was going to say this. No, it's important because I think you need to understand it in the context of this market moving forward, what this might have been, okay? So the previous video that I was shooting, I was actually talking about a fractal, and that fractal was actually the NASDAQ, all right? This is something that a friend of mine, I actually haven't talked to him in quite a while now, over a year, so maybe not a friend, maybe more like a business acquaintance, but we had done some stuff together over the last couple of years, and back in 2018 he had pointed out that he thought that Bitcoin was looking very similar to the NASDAQ after the dot-com bubble, and he was early because he thought that we were much further along in the cycle than what we were, but his idea was very valid, and it's really shown to be valid since then. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I believe that if we look at this fractal, we could say that this is very similar to the 2017 Bitcoin bubble top. I believe that if we look at this fractal, we could say this is very similar to the 2018 Bitcoin bottom, okay? And I believe, let me put this on a monthly chart, it'll look more like it. I believe that we could say this is very similar to the 2019 top, and had I pulled my head out of my rear end and not worried about COVID, I would have seen the obvious similarities to the 2020 drop, right? If you look at this, this was a horrific drop back here. The NASDAQ dropped from around 2,000 points all the way down to around 1,000 points. It was a 50% drop, very similar to March. And if you look at a bubble chart, what you will see is at the beginning of a bubble, in the disbelief phase, you get this really bad shakeout. And what the disbelief is the disbelief is after this comes down like this, disbelief is this. The part where everybody is thinking, okay, well, it's going to be a dead cat bounce and go lower. And if you had watched my videos in March and April of 2020, you would have seen me and heard me saying over and over, I believe this is a dead cat bounce. I believe it might go to 8,000, but then I believe we're going lower. Dead cat bounce, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now the reason this is important is because this is literally playing out exactly like a bubble, and it's exactly what Bitcoin has done since 2017. Now here's the reason that this fractal concerned me a little bit, right? Because after this bottom in 2009 on the NASDAQ, it didn't act like a normal market behavior. It basically went parabolic and just started going up, up, up with nothing but these really small pullbacks. And so one of the possibilities that I was kind of addressing in my previous video that I didn't upload was maybe Bitcoin has kind of reached this same blow-off phase of this whole macro level. And again, I know that I've been putting out this theory that we're in macro distribution for quite a while now. And I think maybe I was just early, it could be going much higher before that actually happens. And the thing about it is what I had noticed about this was it basically didn't have any proper corrections this whole way up. And then it had this correction about 7,600, which if you're looking would be about, 1.5 times its previous high, a little higher than that. So about 60% higher. Then it had this pullback, which was about a 15-20% pullback, right? Nope, sorry, more like 23%. Had another pump, and this next pump basically took the NASDAQ to double, more than double maybe, let's see, right at 102% of the previous all-time high, which was very similar to $40,000 Bitcoin, where it was literally just over double the previous all-time high. And that's the reason that I sat down that night to shoot the video, was I wanted to show this and say, look, if this is playing out like the NASDAQ, what comes next is the 30% dump. Where did I get the 30% number from? Right there. 30.45%. In fact, you can see it from my previous video that I never uploaded. Here are the similarities, right? I'll show you what these circuits are all about in a second. All right, you ready? Let's just go ahead and do this now. If you look at the NASDAQ, which trades about 4 times less than Bitcoin because Bitcoin's open 24/7, and you put a 200 monthly moving average on that NASDAQ chart, watch what happens. The bottom in 02 tested the 200 month moving average. Our bottom in 2018 on Bitcoin tested the 200 week moving average. The bottom in 2009 broke through that 200 month moving average but popped right back above it. Our bottom in 2020 popped through the 200 week moving average and popped right back above it. And I was, I can't remember for sure if I was watching this fractal back then. I think I might have been, and I think this might have been one of the reasons I was so gung-ho on waiting for a W down here, because they had a W back here. But I think when it didn't put in the W, I think I just kind of abandoned it. Like, no, that's not it. But I mean, do you see how crazy similar this is? So anyway, when this thing ran up, double the all-time high, it had a 30% pullback. If we look at this pullback today, whoops. All right, you ready for the pullback? From the top around 42K, 27.95%. So here's the thing, and this is why I wanted to sit down and shoot this video today. I don't know what's going to happen in this market. I'm very, very much done with trying to make these long-term predictions because it's just very difficult to do, and it's so much easier to just trade the smaller time frames. But the reason that I wanted to shoot this is because I've been saying all along that this market is parabolic, and that when this parabolic climb breaks, we should see, by textbook definition, an 80% retrace. I do believe that's what we should see. But I also believe that it's very difficult for me at this point to ignore the similarities and the NASDAQ, right? The NASDAQ is basically blow off top. And somebody on Twitter the other day said, I said something about this, and they said, oh, it's not in a bubble. And I was just like, okay, well, I believe it's in a bubble. I don't have a way to know if I'm right or not, but if you Google it, you will start seeing legendary investors, not some guy on YouTube, guys with 50, 60 years of experience. 2 guys come to mind, and you can just Google, are we in a stock bubble, and read the various articles you find. And 2 of these guys called the .com crash, and they called the housing crisis crash. One of them called I believe it's the 1987 Japanese stock market crash, right? And they both believe that this is the worst one ever in their lifetimes. They believe that this is when this bubble pops that we're in, it will be very similar to the 1929 bubble in the U.S. stock market, which was, of course, labeled the Great Depression, right? And so I think what's happened is Bitcoin is basically finishing out its macro cycle at the same time these stock markets are finishing out their macro cycle, which in their case happens to be a 100-year cycle or a 90-year cycle, whereas Bitcoin's is more like an 11 or 12-year cycle. But I think Bitcoin's finishing up at the same time. And the reason that's important is because that could explain why the market behavior is so different from what we've seen in previous market cycles. It could explain why there is no 61.8% pullback on this entire run up, right? From here to here, we still haven't gotten a true correction. Even this, people say, well, 30%, that's a correction. It's not a true correction, right? It could be the only correction we get in this market. That might be the type of correction we see. But, you look at this thing, and we should be coming down to the 61.8, at the very least a 50 fib. We can't even so far get back down to the 38.2. Right? Even in a raging bull market, you normally get a 38.2 tap. And in fact, even in 2019, we were pulling back to the 38.2, and you had bulls on Twitter saying, in a bull market, 38.2, that's for longing. And they were right until it broke, of course. But it's fine. That's what stop losses are for. If you longed every time it hit it last year and then use a stop loss, you'd have won a bunch of times and lost once. So no big deal. But I guess my thing is I want to kind of set the record straight and say, look, if you're waiting on, these big corrections that I'm talking about, just remember they may not come. And I don't want to induce FOMO. I don't want to scare you. I'm not buying Bitcoin, right? I haven't changed my stance. I'm not about to buy $30,000 Bitcoin, right? Even when it hit $30,000 this morning, I had no interest in buying it, none whatsoever, right? So if I had thought about it, and I didn't think about it because I was in the hospital last night, I had to get some stuff. My leg was all weird and stuff, so I had to go see if I had a blood clot in my leg. But if I had thought about it, I probably would have bought back the Bitcoin that I sold at 31.3, right? Because I sold some of my spot Bitcoin at 31.3. I probably would have bought that back. I did buy my Ethereum back. I sold my Ethereum, some of my Ethereum at $1,207. So I bought it back down around 930 or 940 in that ballpark this morning. But for some reason, I wasn't thinking about Bitcoin. I had bids to buy that Bitcoin back at 27K, and I didn't change the bids. And then I wasn't feeling good. I was tired, so I went to bed at 11 o'clock my time. And when I woke up about an hour or so ago, it was already back up $4,000 or $5,000. So yeah, that's my whole thing. Is I would really be I'd be careful how you play this. I wouldn't automatically say, well, it's pulled back 30%, so I'm just going to start shorting Bitcoin with reckless abandon. I would still make sure you're using proper TA and following setups, and don't let your emotions get the best of you, because this could have been a correction, and it could be the only correction we get. Maybe not. If it's the bubble top, right, if it's not going to play out like this, which, by the way, if you want to see what happened on the NASDAQ, it basically had 2 bad months, pulled back like 30%, and then it skyrocketed up from there, right, another 93%, which would put Bitcoin up around 60K, 55, 60K if Bitcoin did the exact same thing. But if you do want to play this and say, I think this is the top, I think the top is in, it's going to go down from here, there are some reasons that it might be. Okay, so let me show you those. Monthly chart, we're too early into the month to really talk about it, so let's not talk about it. But there's another chart that I use, which I've never seen anybody else use. It's just kind of a chart that I found to work well for me on when I'm doing a position trade. But it's a 12-day chart, and I first started using it in the stock market because I use 3 days in crypto, and then again, stock market moves 4 times as slow. So I started using the 12-day chart in stocks. And now, because Bitcoin is moving more like the stock market than itself in the past, I started using the 12-day on Bitcoin as well. So this closes in 1 day and 1 hour, or really 1 day and about half an hour. And we can see that we have one hell of a wick. Now let's put this on a log chart so that it's not so exaggerated. And if we do that, we can see that there's our 2017 top. There is our 2019 top. There is our 2020 bottom, and here is our current 2021 top. So if this candle closes with that type of wick, what I will start to lean toward is that maybe this is a correction. We won't know if it's the top for, if it keeps going up, obviously it'll be easy to say, well, that wasn't the top. But if it does start going back down, we won't know if that's the cycle top for many, 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 many months, right? So if you're looking for this guarantee where you're going to know next week that that was the cycle top, you're not going to get it, right? Even if this thing starts to fall back, it could just be a correction in this bigger move that's going to take Bitcoin up to those, crazy targets of people put out there, $100,000 targets, etc. I felt like last year, before I got macro bearish, I felt like Bitcoin was going to go to 72,000. I thought it would fall to 4,000 and then go to 72,000. So I still think that's a valid target. And especially as I start to shift my viewpoint, I'm still not a lover of Bitcoin by any means, but I do think that this is a new cycle, right? It's a cycle that's playing out very differently from past cycles. So I do think that some of these targets are in the realm of possibility. I do not consider it a store of value. I consider it a speculative asset. I think if it does get to these targets, the crash will be horrific. We could go to $100,000 Bitcoin and then crash to 10K and have a 90%, crash. You think, oh, that doesn't happen in Bitcoin. Yes, it does. Happens all the time. Crashes between 75 and 90% every time there's a bear market in Bitcoin. That's what it does. I think last year was one of the weaker bear markets, and it was because it was an echo bubble, not a true bubble, and it crashed 74%. That's what Bitcoin does. It runs up huge and then crashes. So it's funny to me, when people are, oh, Bitcoin's never going below 10K again. Even if Bitcoin went to 75K, I would still say it's going below 10K again. It'll just be after the bubble pops, right? So the reason that's important is because you've got a gap at 9,600 bucks on the CME, right? And I keep saying I believe that'll fill. I do. But there's no guarantee it fills before this goes to a cycle top. There's no guarantee this doesn't go to $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 and then fill the gap, right? I mean, I know people don't want to hear that, and they're like, no, James, you're my last hope as a bear. Like, that's one thing that I've noticed, and I think that's why people get so mad at me, is because, like, they're using me to justify decisions they're making, and then when it's not the right decision, they get pissed at me like, this is your fault. Don't use my bearish bias as your excuse to take a trade or not take a trade, because my finances are different from your finances. Yours may be better than mine, yours may be worse than mine, but they're certainly different, right? I'm not a guy that's trying to get rich off of Bitcoin. If you're trying to get rich, you're going to play it different than I am, and you should, right? But that's kind of what I'm saying. I think if this is a correction, I tend to think that what will probably happen is what happens in most corrections, and that's we will get this initial drop followed by some type of bounce and then further downside from there. That's what will happen if this is a true correction. Again, we haven't had true corrections on this run. What we have with stuff like this, where it started to drop, this was where it hit 20K, started to drop, fell to 16, had the bounce. It was like, okay, this is a dead cat bounce. It closed right at 18. You're expecting it to do this, and instead it did this, right? So this has now dropped. It could come up like this, maybe retest 37, 38K, and then finally correct. Or it could come up, pause, let bears load up, and then liquidate them and go higher, right? I think it just depends on how many people start shorting the market. If the liquidity is on the short side, they're going to take it. They're going to pump it higher. If the liquidity is on the long side, like it has been the last week or so, they've punished longs in a big way. If you go over to Coin Analyze and you look at the liquidations, longs have paid a far heavier price lately than shorts, right? This is a liquidation chart for just Bitcoin, not all coins. And yesterday, longs paid $728 million in liquidations. And today they paid $1.02 billion. So in just the last 48 hours, and just Bitcoin, not all coins, nearly $2 billion. If you look at all coins, oh man, look at this. Yesterday was 1.08 billion. And today so far 1.86 billion. So nearly $3 billion in longs were liquidated. Shorts were never that far off sides, right? There were huge shorts liquidations, but nothing like this. This is insane, right? So that's the way this market works, is it waits for one side to get off sides and it starts crushing that side. So bulls keep loading up super, super heavy and shorts aren't, loading up super heavy. We could see this thing go lower. But I do tend to think that, like I said, if that's what's going to happen, I tend to think that, we'll have the dead cat bounce first and then more downside. And, obviously this video would have been better this morning, which, I had said, I shared this with my private group, but it doesn't do you guys much good on YouTube. But, when it hit 30K like that, that's kind of a psychological level. So, seeing some type of bounce is not really that shocking. I think if we lose 30K, that's when you'll start to see some real panic selling. And by the way, just looking at this on a 4-hour chart, that's a left shoulder, that's a head, and I would be very wary watching for a right shoulder on that thing. If we put volume on the chart, buy volume was pretty high over here. Buy volume, I wouldn't even say it dried up here. I'd still say it's pretty high. So I would say this is a very questionable head and shoulders. And with this super high buy volume over here, I think if this does come down, more than likely it's going to be a fake head and shoulders that goes up. It's just going to be used to trap bears, right? And I don't mean goes up to like 50K. I mean, it could just bounce, maybe to 38K, for example, and then move down. I know the video is kind of long, but let's take a look at RSI. And, here's something else I would pay attention to. This is a very obvious double top. The right side's a little bit higher than the left, so that's a little bit weird. But with double tops, remember, you'll often get the double top in price or RSI. You'll get the retest of the neck, and then you'll get the downside like this. So I would be watching this 80 RSI level on the daily. If it does start to pump hard, we could get something like this and then more downside from there. If you're looking at a weekly chart, remember in bull markets, corrections tend to take the RSI down to around that 50 level, right? This is a Binance chart. It doesn't have enough history. Hang on. Bitcoin, USD. Bitstamp has tons of history. All right. So you'll see that on a weekly chart in a bull market, right? Like this last bull market, the weekly chart will often get down to this 50, 55 level, just like it did once we, broke north in early 2020, found support on top of it, found support, and boom, rocket ship. So if it's a correction and you do see it come back down to that level, I would personally, and I'm not saying you should do this, but me personally, I would be looking for long trade setups, not necessarily buying spot. That's a whole different thing. It's investing, but I would be looking for long trades, maybe on a swing trade / position trade type of basis. All right. Again, we're talking pretty far into the future here, unless something just gets really crazy really fast. It's going to take a while to get back down to that level if Bitcoin's going to go there. I think that's one thing about these parabolic climbs is everybody gets used to everything moving so fast and they forget that that's not normal. It's not normal to go up $30,000 or $20,000 in a month, right? It's not normal to go 30% down in a day. Usually these moves take time to play out, and that's what chops traders up. So it may be that this is, going to take a few months to resolve itself, or 3 or 4 weeks to resolve itself. And in the meantime, there'll be a lot of uncertainty about, what's going on, But I would watch that 12-day chart. I'd watch that, if that closes like that, that's one hell of a wick. And then, of course, within a few weeks, when we get to the end of January, we'll really be able to look at this and say, do we have a capitulation wick on this monthly chart? If we look at this, it looks really, really, really bad right now compared to 2017. It's like, oh my gosh, it's the same. But do keep in mind that if you put it on a log chart, it doesn't look the same, right? It doesn't look as bad. So there's your 2017 wick, and here's this wick in 2020. It doesn't look as bad. It doesn't look as toppy on the monthly chart. But again, we don't know where this month is going to close at. Could close higher and that wick will disappear, or it could start to pull down and we could get an even worse wick. And that's my alarm that it daily closes in 15 minutes. So I think I will go ahead and, stop talking about analysis there. I do want to share one more trade tip with you real quick, because I said I was going to do more, trading education type of stuff for 2020. Let me just show you guys something real quick. This is super simple. I didn't invent it. Not taking credit for it. It's just something that most people don't really pay attention to. And I think it's worth paying attention to because Coinbase, is a major on-ramp for a lot of people getting into crypto. And Coinbase, if you go inside of Coinbase's UI, they only offer 2 moving averages. They offer I believe it's the 12 and the 26 EMAs. Now watch what happened with Bitcoin today. Now I'm on TradingView, so obviously I can put whatever moving averages I want, but I'm talking about the Coinbase users that are actually in their user interface trading off of their charts. So we will put a moving average exponential on here, and we will put this on a 26. And you see it, this whole run, look, broke above it there. If you'd have longed the break of that, and it depends how aggressive you want to be, but if you'd have longed the break of that, right, you could have maybe put a stop at the previous low back here. Of course, if you had done that, you'd have probably been long way back here, right, and your stop would have been over here. So boom, you'd have been stopped out. Oh, that sucks, But if you fired another shot right here and put your stop at the previous low, then your trade would look something like this, right? And you'd just be riding that, waiting for that 26 to break and close underneath it, or depending on how you play it. Here's a retest here, so you might, and again, I'm not saying you should do this, I'm just saying this is one way you could approach this market. Here's a retest. You might add to, a long position there at the stop below these. Here's another retest here. And here's a retest here, right? Now, me personally, here's how I play them. when I see the price come down, I'm not necessarily looking to long Bitcoin automatically at those levels, but what it kind of tells me is, pump the brakes on expecting more immediate downside. Expect some type of bounce off of that level. So what I will normally do is when I see the price come down to a level like that, I'll start looking for long setups on like an hourly chart, a 4-hour chart, a 15-minute chart, a 5-minute chart, whatever it is. I'll start looking for an excuse to get long on some type of swing trade or some type of day trade, because you're normally going to get a really good reaction off of that line if you're coming, if you're way off of it. Now I'm not talking about when you're grinding on it. When you're grinding on it, it's different because this is a ranging market, but I'm talking about a trending market that breaks off of it and comes back, from, like for here, for example, it's $2,000 or $3,000, boom, this huge drop right in a line. Or from here, boom, this huge drop. Or from here, boom, this huge drop. You get a reactionary bounce. Some of that's probably natural, but I think a lot of it is just a lot of people are watching that line, especially on a site like Coinbase, and they're waiting to buy Bitcoin when it touches it, right? There are trade strategies that's literally how they work. When it touches a certain moving average, different traders use different ones, but when it touches a certain moving average, that trader will automatically take that trade. And if you look here, today's moving average was around 30,400. It says 30,700 now because it's bounced, but when this happened, it was 30,400, and it's had a $5,000 bounce off of that moving average. So I wanted to show you that, and it's not just Bitcoin. You go look at some of the major alts, you'll see the same thing. Like here's Ethereum, and this right here, you see how perfect it was? That right there is why I bought back the Ethereum that I sold up around $1,207. It came down, slammed into this moving average, and then as soon as it started to bounce, I bought it back. Again, that's not really a trade, okay? I said I didn't automatically long it. I don't. That was buying back what I had sold. So that was coins that I'm not trying to make US dollars off of them at this point. What I'm doing is just trying to sell it and then use the proceeds from that sell to buy back more when it drops. So the whole thing with it is I will ride it to zero, or I will ride it as high as it goes. So I'm not worried about catching a perfect bottom. I'm not worried about, well, what if I buy it at 900 and it goes to 700, or it goes to 500 or 300? I don't care, right? There is no stop loss. It's an investment. It's not a long position. It's not a trade, if you will. It is an investment. So I sold up here, bought back down here, and now I'm up, whatever it is, $150 or whatever per Ethereum. So there are lots of ways to attack this market, and a lot of people think, well, if I'm a believer, I should never sell. That's up to you. I don't believe that. I believe if you're a believer, that it would benefit you to learn to trade so that you know when to take profits and you know when to buy back, So for example, on that Ethereum, I sold up here. Well, I bought it back on about a 30% dip. I don't know the exact number, probably more like 20%. But I was able to buy back 20% more Ethereum. It's not like I only bought back the exact same Ethereum and then just kept US dollars. No, I just put all that profit back into more Ethereum. And that's what I did in 2017 that allowed me to take a very small portfolio up to a multiple six-figure portfolio. I was selling the rips and buying the dips, to be cliche, right? So for example, and it doesn't always work. If the market turns into a bear market, it'll blow up in your face. So for example, I sold Verge. I had 100,000 Verge that I had bought at half a cent. I sold them damn near perfect at the top at 30 cents, but then I bought them back at 17 cents. Now at the time I thought I was a genius because I was like, oh my God, look at this. I crushed this. Of course, I didn't realize at the time that Verge was going to go back to half a cent. So I ended up losing basically everything, or it dropped right back down. But, I took the extra money, and what I did with it was I bought Bitcoin. I didn't put all the money back in the Verge. I bought back the Verge that I had sold at 30 cents. I bought it back at 17 cents, and then I took that other money and I put it into Bitcoin. So that's another way you can do it, is if you have a favorite coin, you can take those profits and buy that coin with it. So just some tips, and again, I'm not trying to call market tops. I really don't know. I think we got to wait, and I'm not even, I kind of feel like Tom, I can't remember Tom's last name now, but the big famous bull, Tom Lee, I think, he kept telling everybody Bitcoin was going to 25,000 or whatever, 50,000 in 2018. and he was dead wrong. And a lot of people got really angry at him, myself included, because I was like, this is one of these guys that's supposed to know what he's talking about. This market, was obviously in a bear market. But, after 2020 and me being on the other side of that coin, it's really easy to get blinded by your bias. It's really easy to not see what's, obviously right in front of your face. So rather than do that, I'm just going to stick on educational content and stick on the smaller time frames. And I'm going to try to present both sides of it. So again, with this Bitcoin right now, there's two sides to that coin. It could be the local top. We could be in for a traditional correction of 61.8 or an 80% retracement. We could also be, following that NASDAQ fractal where 30% is the correction. And it's just going to go up from here. So you'll have to make your own decisions on how you play it. All right. With all that being said, please remember, I'm just some guy sitting in a spare bedroom. So nothing in this video is financial advice. You should always do your own due diligence and seek out professional financial advice from a licensed financial advisor before making any type of investment in cryptocurrency, the stock market, or precious metals. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure and give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And again, if you'd like to get access to more frequent updates, you can check the description for a link to join my Patreon. It's just $7 a month. You get access to Patreon and the Patreon Discord. Full disclosure, the Discord is not a chat, so it's not like we're going to sit in there and talk all day. It's just me posting charts each day and more frequent updates than what I do on YouTube. So, all right, this is James with Crypto Common Sense, reminding you to please trade safe.